They they stressed obedience. The stable family, you had to be obedient. Chinese at first might have constructed their houses of wooden planks, but then later they began to use tile and brick. Their houses were often sparsely furnished with very little furniture inside. To us, they might look bare. Now, your book mentions that the earlier Chinese, the nobles might have, probably only the nobles drank at first, but they quickly noticed they had a problem with it. Now, in no way do I mean to sound racial, but I have noticed that Oriental peoples, including American Indians, the effect of alcohol on them is far worse than it is on Africans or Europeans. Again, you can take that for what you will. And a lot of...
Why do you think that is?
What's that?
Why do you think that is?
I read about it not too long ago, is that the Chinese have a gene that absorbs it in a different way than it does in Africans and Europeans. And it absorbs it in such a way it takes effect quicker and does more altering of their mind than it does to
Do you think it's
some other
because other countries have higher tolerances?
that they what?
Do you just think it's because like other people in other countries have higher tolerance or something?
Now, some people speculate that when you have people like in Islamic countries where they have not drank in 1,000 years, and all of a sudden somebody brings in alcohol and start drinking, that the effect is worse. In American India, same thing. They hadn't had any alcohol for maybe hundreds of years before the Europeans came, and then it just went. They just went haywire when it
If
came.
you just look at people in America, like the culture, like people use everything as an excuse to drink or whatever.
Well, again, it affects different people in different ways. Yeah.
I know I have a few Asian friends, I don't know if they're Chinese or not, but they turn like really red when they drink, so they might be like allergic to the alcohol or something. So
Allergic
maybe
might be a good
something in
word.
their DNA.
That might be the case. The DNA that might be the case.
I mean, I don't know
Again.
who here is Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I could tell you a story that I don't even want to repeat of what happened to a Chinese, an Asian man when I was in the Army. Actually, he was from Hawaii, but of Asian descent. And the way he acted when he got drunk would be better off if I didn't try to describe it. But the group I was with, the outfit I was with, was a very drunken bunch of young men, though I did not participate. When the sergeant told the men they could go to the rat's nest, I'm talking about Camp Fort Gordon, he could not make me go. I mean, that was not part of my training. So me and a bunch of men would just quietly stay behind the barracks while the rest of the crew went and pitched a big one. Never mind, that's it. But the Oriental person I'm talking about, I mean, like I say, you'd be better off. For one thing, he couldn't open his locker, couldn't even remember his combination, so we had to take his, they had to actually undress him and stuff his clothes in their lockers because the sergeant would inspect in the morning and then one other thing. He got next morning, oh, I made it nuts to myself last night, didn't I? Yeah, you did. Anyway, enough of that. I mean, for you Oriental people, my apologies. I'm just stating what I observed. No offense intended. I mean, hey, let me tell you, I don't touch this stuff myself. I would encourage you not to either, regardless. And folks, I'm going to say this. You don't know how it's going to affect you. Now, on a very personal note, I suspect that I'm what's called a dry alcoholic. If I ever take a drink, I might become addicted to it. Now, why do I suspect that? Well, I have a reason. I mean, if you have a real fondness for sweets, so if you find certain like computer card games addictive or find sweets addictive, what?
You have an addictive personality.
Addictive personality, yeah. Or if you also have failed, and you fail in your friendships, your relationships, if you keep failing over and over again, you have to face the fact that it's probably your fault. And folks, that's a hard issue to face. Hey, my life did not come together until I realized my problems with people. I have met the enemy, and it is me. And until you get to that point, I had a woman about 5 years ago jump all over me for suggesting that some of her problems might be her own fault. Not always. Not always, but both.
You say that to woman?
Uh,
It's not. You gotta put her in the place sometimes.
all right.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway, actually, I suspected it for many, many years. And also, another more concrete reason, if on your father's side of your family, now my father did not drink. My grandfather didn't either, but my grandfather's brother did and quickly developed a problem with it. One of my brothers started drinking, and he quickly developed a problem with it. And one of my brothers who did not drink himself, a couple of his children did, and they developed a problem with it fast. Again, that's a firm reason to believe, because a lot of people believe that the gene for addictions come from father to child, both male child and female child. But it's inherited from your father. And if your father were alcoholic, you don't need to touch the stuff. Again, I don't know if my father was or not, but if anyone was, he probably was. All right, enough of that. All right, anyway. Now I've discussed with my brother and sister saying, yeah, he probably was, except for one of my brothers. None of us ever took it up. But the one who did wishes he hadn't. All right. All right, we'll move on quickly. Women. Now, your book, the authors seem to hit hard on the fact that the Chinese were really chauvinistic toward their women all the way back to the beginning. And yes, this is documented. The Chinese have all throughout their history tried to keep their women in line and keep their women subservient. And later on, when we visit China again, we're going to talk about how they bound their women's feet to make their feet small and make them crippled. Now, this practice was still going on as recently as my own lifetime. And they felt like, anyway, you have a comment?
I was actually about to bring up the whole foot binding.
About what?
I was actually about to ask about the whole foot binding thing.
Yeah, the foot binding thing we'll deal with in a later chapter. It probably did not get started until the 1300s and lasted until the communists outlawed the practice. But even though the communists outlawed it in 1950, it was still going on in the countryside. Your authors will say that when they visited China, they saw some women who had their foot bound. The purpose was two purposes. Number one, to keep them subservient, and number two, to supposedly make them more attractive. Now, I had a 21st century young American man a few years back and thought, I don't find a crippled woman attractive. I said, being an American, you don't, I don't either. But the Chinese men apparently did. Again, to each his own. Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Down throughout history, the Chinese are known to, in hard times, when they had famine and they needed to get rid of a few people, they get rid of their girl babies or their young girls, those preschool age girls. This they have done, and then in the 20th century, and I asked this morning how many persons heard this, and probably a lot of you have. In the 20th century, when the Chinese government tried to limit their population, a lot of couples would kill their girl babies because the boy babies were deemed more important, and also the boys started family names. So the result, these boys grew up and could not find wives, and they didn't realize if they didn't bring up forth girl babies, they're not going to have any descendants anyway to carry on the family name. I mean, that's fundamental biology. Now, having said this, how many of you have heard this from another source? Okay, most of the hands in the room are going up. So, I mean, it sounds like a fairy tale, folks. That's why I always ask how many heard, because a lot